Hi everyone. Just wanted to do this little lesson on Notion and more particularly about journaling. As you know, I do reference quite a lot about journaling your trades, and I say it for a good reason because journaling your trade, you're going to find out what's working for you, what's not. If there's any deficiencies in your understanding of your trading edge, and you'll also find areas where you can improve on. So, this was something that came up in conversation with one of the mentorship students the other day, and it's something that I've had a few calls recently with the mentorship guys, and it's something that's come up quite regularly. So I just really wanted to do this for everybody to get an idea of the sort of things you really should be trying to incorporate within your trading journals. So what I've got here, if you remember on Monday, on the 16th, I took a Euro USD long trade. I closed partials and secured 3%. So if you've watched the Notion video, then you'll have an idea of how to get this page up. If you use something like Microsoft Excel, you can still incorporate the same type of data. It might take a little bit more fiddling about, but you can still, record the same data in the same way. But I like to use Notion. I think Notion is very, very good. It's very organized and really easy to use. So let's have a look. Let's break this down and have a look at the sort of information that I like to record. So as you can see, you've got the title here, Euro USD. The status of the trade was a win. Even though the remainder hit break even, it's still a win because I managed to bank some profit from this. We've selected the pair Euro USD, and this, as you know, if you've watched the Notion video, you'll know this helps us filter out the different trade pairs within the main screen. So we put in their position, it was a long trade. The trade was opened on the 16th, and the trade, so even though it was the remaining 20% volume actually closed the following day, the actual profit was secured on the same day. So yeah, trade was open on the 16th. The session was the London session. I secured 3%, and so if you imagine, I didn't quite close out at 4R or 4% because by the time I managed to open up MC4 and close partial trades, it retraced a little bit. And then the 80% close worked out around about 3%. So the confluences for the trade, I've just selected the confluences. So we have breaker structures, liquidity inducement candle, higher time frame continuation, liquidity grabs. And then the stop loss size, I used 8 pips for this stop loss. So I'm just going to give a quick overview, and as you can see, there's a fair amount of data in here. Why is it scrolling down? So this is everything I've recorded for this particular trade, and we're going to go through why I've included certain information. Now, one of the things that I spoke to you about with one of the guys on the mentorship course, on the mentorship section was when I was looking at screenshots, I asked him, "Do you remember this particular trade?" That particular trade, I asked him about. He said, "Yes, I do remember this particular trade." I then explained to him, "Do you remember a trade that you took over a month ago?" And they said no. So even if you just have a simple screenshot, let's say for example, this was the only screenshot you had, you've put it in an Excel folder or you've put it into a Notion document or somewhere where you've recorded it and you come back to it and this is all you've got to go off. There's not really a lot explaining the entire thought process. So you really want to try and paint the picture and try and think of it in a way that you're trying to explain the thought process of your trade to somebody that has no idea about the trade. Because when it comes to months or even maybe a year or two down the line, if you need to come back to your own data and look at things that you've learned to establish where you've come from and how far you've progressed, you're not going to remember every single trade. So if you can explain it in a way that there's potentially somebody looking at it has no idea why this trade was taken, it's going to paint a really clearer picture, and that somebody is most likely going to be you. Okay, so as we've got here, I've got the overall trend here, or the overall view on the 15 minute. So my notes are overall trend is bullish prior to the POI. There was nothing left on the lick. Sorry, prior to the POI with the lick, there was nothing left on this time frame from recent price action to come back and mitigate. So this was the overall view for this trade here. We can see a 5 minute view as well. We've got some notes in here. We've swept sell side liquidity of the Asia session. We've not got anything left on the 5 minute below to mitigate. And then I've included a screenshot of the liquidity inducement candle, and then I've also highlighted a concern about this trade. So as we can see here on the 1 minute, we can also see below the lick that there was a POI at the lowest swing point. And I was referring to this point here. This was something that was in the back of my mind when I was taking this trade, and I've recorded that because it's something that might become relevant later on down the line. And these are the sort of things you might start to see patterns within the types of trades that you're taking, and you might think, hold on, this is something that I'm seeing quite often, and I'm hitting break even, or I'm my partials are only getting so far, and potentially, I'm not saying this is, but potentially this could be something that you could spot further down the line that could be a hindrance to some of your trades, and you might then think, right, I'm actually going to wait till this is mitigated before I take the trade. And so that's an example. So I'm not necessarily saying this was the reason the trade failed. It was something I was aware of, but it's just something you need to keep in mind when you're journaling your trades. If you do spot things like this, journal it, write it down, because like I said, it could be a pattern. I've then got a screenshot of the 1 minute entry. So as you can see here, we had a divergence, price consolidated a little bit around my entry point. We also had the divergence on the RSI indicator. So this was all logged as well. Then trade management. Once the trade was activated, we can see price had pushed up. It broke past this high point here, and this is where I've got stops to break even. And I've wrote this down as well because, again, if you're coming back to this a little while, in the future, months or even years down the line, and you've not got this on a screenshot and you've not written it down, you might not understand why you've closed. Why you've set stoppers to break even at a certain point, because you need a visual reminder of what was going on with this trade setup. And again, if we go further down, I've then highlighted in trade management where I've then closed partials. So it was around this point here is where I've closed the partials. And as you can see, I've also put in there how long later it took to get to that point. So it was roughly an hour later after the price, after the trade was opened. Price had reached just shy of 4 hour, and the markets were slowing down at this point, and that's what influenced me to take partials and just leave the rest to run. And as you can see, then I've got the full trade closure. So moving forward a little bit further, I've then mentioned that the following day the remaining 20% was then taken out of break even, and I'm absolutely fine with that. Now, one key thing that I don't think many people are really incorporating into their journaling is their psychology and any learning points about that particular trade. So in the psychology, you can see here, I felt happy about this setup. Everything felt right. I kept an eye on the 1 minute zone below the entry point, but this didn't sway my judgment as I was fully aware of how bullish the higher time frame is. So if you remember from the forecast for this trade and the outlook and everything, we could see that Euro USD was very, very bullish, and I was just looking to capitalize on that higher time frame trend. And also with some learning points here. So for this one, it wasn't particularly a learning point, because what I'm referring to here is, as you can see, price was consolidating for a period of time, and it wasn't something I really considered whilst the trade was opened. I just kind of left the remaining 20% to run. So I probably should have been a little bit more focused on this, but I've already secured profit from this, so it doesn't really matter so much. But we can see price had consolidated after the partials were closed. I should have anticipated a sweep of the sell side liquidity, because after this, price did actually push back to the upside. So when we see a consolidation, if we see a sweep of buy side liquidity, it usually means price is going to push down. Then vice versa, if we see a sweep of sell side liquidity, then we may see price pushed back to the upside. But again, with learning points, I've also mentioned that with the setup, I could have used a slightly smaller stop loss. I'm not too bothered about the fact that I didn't, but if you look at how much, there was barely any drawdown with this trade, and if you look at the wider picture, if I come up to here, we can see, there wasn't really much below this point for price to come and mitigate. So, maybe obviously I use an 8 pip stop, so maybe a 6 or a 5 pip stop loss would have been fine, but I'm not worrying too much about that because I don't want to get too greedy within the markets. And again, I'll put this here, would take this setup again. So if this trade setup came about again in the future, I'll definitely take it. There wasn't really anything wrong with the trade setup in my view. I took 3%, the rest hit break even, not too bothered, I paid myself. So that's the main thing that really matters. So guys, try and incorporate as much detail as you can with your journaling. Take some inspiration from this, because the more you're able to journal, the more you're able to remind yourself in the future why you've taken certain trades. The more detail you can include, the clearer things are going to become, and it's going to really, really help accelerate your learning process and even just your trading experience in general. So Guys, hope you found some value with this. If you have any questions, as usual, please feel free to let me know.